Alright, so why did I buy an e-bike? I used to be totally against e-bikes, and now I'm a big fan and proponent of e-bikes. Two main reasons. First reason is time. I just don't have that much time. I can't be going out for 4, 5, 6 hour epic rides anymore. Kids want me at home, especially on the weekends. The second reason is to simply build my skills, just to be able to practice cornering, jumping, and with this e-bike, I'm able to improve on those two skills a little bit faster than a regular bike. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on the upgrades that I've done on this bike. You could check out my bike check video if you want to get some details on what I've done so far. Okay, how does this bike handle? It handles really well for such a heavy bike. I think one of the reasons why is it has a really low bottom bracket, so it has a really low center of gravity. So when you're leaning the bike over in corners, like when you're doing this and that, you know, you're leaning the bike over, right? The lower the center of gravity, the easier it is to pick it back up, like this. So I played with the bottom bracket, switched it from from the low position to the high position. And what I've noticed is when I lean the bike over, it feels a little bit heavier bringing it back up. So it just, you know, just having that slightly higher center of gravity actually does make a difference leaning the bike over. Most bikes with this much travel have a really high bottom bracket. This bottom bracket is actually very low. And because of that, you're able to really lean the bike over and bring it back up easier. So that hides some of its weight. So how does this bike handle chunk? It handles it very confidently. No issues at all. It used to be a little bit harsher when it had the Yari fork, but since I've upgraded the damper and I increased the travel a little bit, it handles the chunk so much better. It's nice and composed, stable at speed. It handles chunky stuff just fine. No concerns whatsoever. Now, even though it's super capable, I wouldn't consider this a race bike at all. You could go fast, but it's just not as fast as something like that Enduro over there. This Enduro is it's noticeably quicker than this bike when you're descending. Even though this one has a little bit more weight, and they say e-bikes build up speed so much faster, and it does, but according to my Strava times and stuff, this bike is a lot faster than this bike going downhill. Now, in terms of the fun factor, it's definitely fun. Both bikes are great fun. This is a different type of fun because your entire ride experience, not just the downhills, but the climbing and uphills as well, is enjoyable. So the overall experience is really fun on this bike. Fun on this bike too, but you add in quite a bit of suffering. Now, one thing I want to note is with the extra weight of this bike, it's a lot harder to manual or wheelie this bike. Or bunny hop. It's just a lot harder to get the front wheel up. So this bike actually jumps pretty well. You wouldn't think so for an e-bike, but e-bikes could actually jump pretty well. I don't know if it's the extra weight pushing into the suspension right before a jump or whatever. I can't really explain it, but it jumps pretty well. You don't really notice the weight too much in the air. Also, because you're able to put in a couple of pedal strokes right before you jump, you're able to gain some speed with this bike and clear some jumps a little bit easier. I noticed that on landings and on drops, it sounds a lot louder. It's just, I don't know if it's the tires just hitting the ground harder or whatever because of the extra weight, but it just sounds very different. It sounds like it's a big old slap whenever the tires make contact compared to like a slightly lighter bike. It just sounds a little bit louder. So in terms of quality, I do notice a few creaks and rattling sounds here and there. It could be the cables bouncing like this. It could be just little creaks and stuff coming from the motor or the bottom bracket. There's a little bit of noise coming out of the hub. It makes some funky creaking, crackling sounds every now and then. The other issue I have with this bike is the paint. This paint scratches so easily, especially the matte sections of this bike. If you go on a ride and you get some dirt, just get some dirt on it. If you let that dirt dry, if you just take a towel and just wipe some of that dirt, it actually leaves scuff marks all over the paint. It's pretty ridiculous how easily the paint scratches. So if you do get this bike, I would suggest just wrapping as much of it as possible. So the other issue I had with this bike was actually the battery. actually got the battery terminals wet from washing the bike. I might have gotten some water. I might have sprayed some excess water into the battery compartment or into one of these openings up here. And basically the battery connection terminal is up here somewhere. And if you get it wet, what happens is when you turn the bike on, it'll say Shimano steps and it would just get frozen. It would just say Shimano steps forever. So what I had to do was I had to remove the battery. And when I did remove the battery, I realized that the terminals were wet. So what I had to do was I had to dry it. I just left the battery out overnight. And the next day I was able to reinstall it and everything was fine. It happened to me on 2 occasions. I washed this bike probably a dozen times, and it's happened to me twice. So now when I do wash it, I'm extra careful. I'll spray water maybe from up here only, and try not to spray water on the sides. Just spray water from the top and just wipe it down a little bit here and there, and just avoid getting water in this area right here. You can spray it everywhere else. You can spray the motor. I never had any issues. It was just getting water over here. And the second time it happened, I knew exactly what the cause was, and I was able to fix it right away. But it could be an issue if you're traveling with this bike somewhere and you wash the bike and the next day it doesn't work. That's going to suck. So you want to be super careful with that battery. What I've done, I haven't had the issue. I haven't had this issue come back in a while, because what I've done was I added a little bit of dielectric grease in the battery terminal. Added a bit of dielectric grease on the terminals, and that's supposed to block out some water from getting into the terminals. So just use some cleaner on like contact cleaner on the terminals. Just clean it out as much as you can, and then apply a good amount of dielectric grease there. I'm not sure if that voids the warranty or not, but it does. It's supposed to block out some water from getting in there. I haven't had the issue with the bike since I've done that. Yeah, so overall, I totally recommend this bike. It's not cheap, but it's pretty affordable compared to other e-bikes in this range. I also think it's a very good looking bike. Obviously the down tube is quite massive. It looks really good from most angles, but when you look at it from this angle right here, it's very flat and kind of looks like an e-bike from this angle, but on other angles it looks okay. It looks almost like a regular bike. So overall, I'm very happy with this bike. I highly recommend it, not only for older people, but just for people who want to improve their skills. They just want to get more riding time. They're limited on time. Alright, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. In my next video, I'll try to compare this bike against the Specialized Enduro. They're very similar bikes, but both have their pros and cons. So I'll compare and contrast the two.